Here's Justin Trudeau claiming that he has some sort of mandate to proceed. Take a look at this.
Mes amis, thank you all. You are sending us back to work with a clear mandate to get Canada through this pandemic and to the brighter days ahead. And my friends, that's exactly what we are ready to do.
A mandate? He won the election with 32%, the lowest percentage that any Canadian government, federal government in history has won, and yet because of our quirky first past the post system of how it's all added up, that 32% was enough to put him in charge. Never before has it happened with such a low count. And by the way, voter turnout was down, I guess partly because of people afraid to go out from the COVID, I think. Also partly because it was cold during the summer. I don't know. I think people were just frustrated by the lack of choice. That's what I would say. But the voter turnout was down significantly. And so even though Justin Trudeau got about 30% of the vote, he did so in a much smaller voter pool. In fact, he received about 1.5 million votes less than he had last time. And yet he's claiming a mandate. In fact, here's his senior global warming strategist hired from the Tides Foundation, is where she came from. Here she is crowing on Twitter that this is a mandate to proceed even more dramatically on the global warming file. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's that, but I think Trudeau will do what he always wants to do. I mean, he didn't, if you listen to when he said he believed in China's basic dictatorship, remember how he finished that sentence. It was so they could do environmental action twice as fast as a democracy with checks and balances could. So here's that full quote where he talks about using the basic dictatorship to ram through environmental ideas. Look at this.
The level of admiration I actually have for China, because their basic dictatorship is allowing them to actually turn their economy around on a dime and say, we need to go green as fast as we need to start, investing in solar.
Yeah, so I don't think Trudeau has a mandate, but really, if the NDP and the Bloc and even Erin O'Toole are all in agreement on the basic principles, a carbon tax is good, we got to transition off the oil sands, we somehow think that the Paris global warming meeting that the UN had is binding on us. There really is no difference of opinion amongst the old school parties on any of this. So maybe Trudeau actually does have a mandate in that Tweedledee, Tweedledum, and all the other think-alikes in the party leadership, they're all on board with that. I was desperate for some good news last night, and I found it in the little city of Peterborough, Ontario, which is quite a lovely city. And if you ever have the chance, just go there. You'll be surprised what a lovely town it is. And I have to say, my esteem for Peterborough, which was always there, it reached new heights yesterday when they threw out Miriam Monsef, the woman who just weeks ago, in a prepared script, this was not a gaffe, this was not her extemporaneously riffing, she said the Taliban were her brothers. Remember this?
I want to take this opportunity to speak to our brothers, the Taliban. We call on you to ensure the safe and secure passage of any individual in Afghanistan out of the country.
Yeah, that's just so gross. Remember, she, of course, was a liar who lied on her refugee application, claiming she was from Afghanistan as opposed to Iran, which is the truth. Here's Bob Fife asking her about that. And look at her lie. She's such a bad liar.
So you were born in Afghanistan, correct?
I believe I was.
Well, Trudeau didn't throw her out right then and there, which he should have done, but the good people of Peterborough took care of that business last night, and I congratulate them. That's the one shining light for me. On the other side of the country, in a lovely riding, again, if you've ever been to Vancouver, you've simply got to go to Granville Island, especially if you like to snack, which rumor has it I do. The outgoing MP there, of course, was Jody Wilson-Raybould, perhaps the most ethical MP of our age, someone who was the Justice Minister and gave it all up because she wouldn't go along with Justin Trudeau's corrupt plans. Well, that riding, given that Jody Wilson-Raybould was no longer running again, it was an open seat, and the Liberals ran a star candidate called Talib Nur Mohammed, and it was revealed that he is a schemer and a scammer who made his living speculating, buying properties and flipping them, never taking possession of them, flipping them to families who desperately needed them, but he would buy them up, flip them, and resell them at a higher price. He did this over 40 times. This, even though that city was the center of Trudeau's plan to reduce housing costs, it's scammers like this. And I don't know if there was any criminality. I don't know if there was mortgage fraud involved. Believe me, I think there should be an investigation because it's so irregular. Who buys and sells 42 houses over the course of a couple decades? But listen to this crooked little liberal evading and fibbing and dodging and weaving when he was asked basic questions about it. Look at this.
How much have you profited on those 25 in the past decade?
I mean, I'm not, I think it's important to talk about, I'm going to answer that question again, so I'm going to be sure
Yeah, how much have you profited on those sales?
When you ask, I'm going to give me a second to just make sure I have the right, okay, so, sorry, ask me the question again, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
How much have you profited personally or business-wise on the sales of those 25 properties in the last decade?
While I can't give you an exact number, what I can tell you is that it is by no means the number that has been put forward, but what I can also tell you is that I am absolutely committed to any and all measures that we have put forward that would apply.
Well, I sure wish Jody Wilson-Raybould had been running as an independent. I think she would have won because Talib Noor-Mohammed, that crooked guy you saw there, is within 1% of the win. All night it was between him and actually the local NDP candidate. And as of this morning, when I last checked the count, I think there was one poll outstanding. Talib Noor-Mohammed, that crooked liberal, was ahead by like 1%. I think it's close enough that there may be an automatic recount. But it's just quite something if Talib Noor-Mohammed wins again. For that riding, Vancouver-Granville, wonderful place to go from the most ethical MP in Canada, Jody Wilson-Raybould, to a confessed crook who is brazen about it. Imagine switching such a polarity. I've got whiplash just thinking about it. Now, as the polls were about to close, they were still open, and voting in Western Canada was still open, Erin O'Toole, his campaign bosses, started spinning their defeat, as in they had allowed themselves to hope and to whisper to anyone who would listen that they had a real chance of winning the election. They said that just a couple of weeks ago, and indeed pollsters seemed to show that had the election been called 2 weeks ago, O'Toole would have likely won a minority government. Well, last night you could see the campaign chairman, Walid Solomon, who is famous for working with that corrupt other Ontario politician, Patrick Brown, the short-lived leader of the provincial Conservative Party. Walid Solomon told the Toronto Star, before polls had closed, that no, it's not going to be a blowout, and it's simply a win to stop Trudeau from getting a majority. I mean, he basically was trying to spin his own disastrous campaign. You can see the headline right here. About 2 weeks ago is when Erin O'Toole panicked. The Liberals were coming at him with the old reliable accusations. You're going to ban abortion. You're going to give every child a gun, or whatever insane things they cooked up. And the answer, of course, is not to play that game, to choose your own controversies on purpose. And O'Toole actually had one or two of those when he said he would raise Canada's flags again. He would oppose tearing down statues. You know, that's a mild controversy, but it is controversial in these days to say you'll stand by Canadian icons. But instead of choosing his controversy, like saying, oh, I'm really against the concept of lockdowns. I think we have to move away from a punishment approach. I think we have to respect civil liberties. Like, you don't even have to go full Ron DeSantis. Instead of choosing those controversies, he allowed himself to get bogged down, especially on the firearms question. And he managed to confirm all of the suspicions in the media by changing his platform on the fly in response to Liberal and media demands that he agree with the Liberals on everything they have to say about guns, about firearms, and he did. So he blinked, he showed weakness, he confirmed the accusations by basically agreeing to them, and he demoralized his own party. I think that's the moment where O'Toole fell back. And of course, it was just like his decision to fall back on carbon taxes, which he calls carbon levies. I mean, the question is, if you are indistinguishable from the Liberals, why wouldn't people just vote for the Liberals? They're better at being Liberals. Now, one of the things that the polls generally got right, but that I got wrong, was the PPC, the People's Party, led by Maxime Bernier. There are a few outlier polls, or a few rogue polls, especially ones done by Frank Graves of ECOS. And I should have remembered that Frank Graves is a extremist, partisan, really strange for a pollster, the Twitter wars he gets into. He's a bought and paid for liberal. In fact, he gives private advice to the Liberal Party, which is so odd for a pollster to do. So when he said in his polls that Maxime Bernier's party was at 10, 11, 12%, I allowed myself to think, well, maybe that's true. I didn't discount it, realizing that ECOS is the least reliable pollster. So when the Maxime Bernier vote came in, it was not 10%. It was more like 5%, a little bit higher than that. And no doubt that was a huge success to triple the party's support, more than double the Green Party's support, and smashing any attempt by the future Debates Commission to keep out Maxime Bernier and the People's Party, though they'll rig the rules again. So I was disappointed in the People's Party outcomes. There were some ridings where they had double digits, and there were definitely some ridings when the People's Party clearly stopped the Conservative Party from winning. Now, Erin O'Toole in the final weeks of the campaign condemned Maxime Bernier and the People's Party and said a vote for Bernier is actually a vote for Trudeau. But that's not really true, because voters aren't owned by any party. They, especially Maxime Bernier's supporters, tend to be policy-driven. They tend to be ideas-driven. They don't owe their allegiance to some stranger named Erin O'Toole, who they only just heard of and who seems to sell out on every issue. I think that if Erin O'Toole had been warmer towards those disaffected people and talked more about the language of freedom and even gently opposed lockdowns and vaccine passports, I think he would have picked up 1, 2, 3% of those 5% that went for Bernier. And I think he would have had a few more seats. More than that, he would have chosen his own controversies rather than letting the media party choose a controversy for him. But I have to say, I think that Maxime Bernier has built a movement. Now, the locus, the place of that movement, is actually not in his own riding of Quebec. If you look in his riding of Beauce, Quebec, he fell back. He wasn't even in contention. Maxime Bernier was the strongest in the prairies, in Alberta and Saskatchewan and some Ontario ridings. I think that's interesting. I think he's built a movement. We have a friend named Viva Fry. He's a YouTuber. His real name is David Fryheit. He's a thoughtful law blogger. And he ran as a People's Party candidate, and of course hundreds did. And I think it transformed them into perpetual activists. I think Maxime Bernier really is creating a movement. Whether or not he can turn that movement into a party is yet to be seen. That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.